The call came at midnight. Kang Dae-hyun answered on the second ring, already irritated. The voice on the other end was female, calm, unfamiliar. "You took my husband." He almost hung up. Another desperate wife, another plea he'd ignore. Then she said, "We took your mother." Kang laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "Is that supposed to?" In the background, he heard it. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Village drums, the kind used for festivals and funerals. And beneath them, unmistakable, his mother's soft, chronic cough. His hand tightened on the phone. This was the moment a Mafia boss realized power doesn't always come from fear, the narrator's voice cut in. Sometimes it comes from unity. The woman spoke again, each word precise. "Dawn. The old road. Come alone." The line went dead. Kang stared at his phone, his empire suddenly feeling very small. But how did a quiet village pull off the impossible? It's a new year, and while others scroll past stories like this, you stayed. That means you care, you feel, you don't want to miss moments that remind us we're alive. So subscribe, join this family, and tell me where you're watching from. Your presence matters more than you think today. The village of Seolmi existed in the kind of silence that felt deliberate, as though the world had agreed to let it rest. Tucked between terraced rice fields and a low mountain ridge, it was a place where time moved with the seasons, where neighbors knew the shape of each other's sorrows without needing to speak them aloud. Here, safety wasn't a promise, it was a rhythm. The clatter of breakfast bowls. The shuffle of work boots on dirt paths. The evening lamplight that turned each window into a small, warm world. Ara had learned to trust that rhythm. She stood at the edge of their modest plot, watching Jin-tae work the irrigation channels with the same careful attention he gave everything. His movements were measured, almost meditative. He didn't waste energy. Even after 8 years of marriage, she sometimes caught herself studying him, the way his shoulders curved inward slightly, as if he were always bracing for something, the way his hands moved with a precision that seemed borrowed from another life. "You'll wear yourself thin," she called out, her voice soft enough not to startle him. Jin-tae straightened, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. When he smiled at her, it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, though she'd stopped mentioning that years ago. "Just finishing up. The West Channel keeps silting over." She walked toward him, carrying a thermos of barley tea. The earth was still damp from last week's rain, and her steps left shallow impressions in the mud. When she reached him, she poured tea into the metal cap and handed it to him without ceremony. He drank it in 3 long swallows. "You think too much," she said quietly. "Someone has to." It was their oldest exchange, worn smooth by repetition. She didn't press. In Seolmi, you learned early that some things stayed buried not because they were forgotten, but because digging them up served no one. The afternoon passed the way most afternoons did. Ara tended the vegetable garden while Jin-tae reinforced the fence posts that had begun to rot. By the time the sun started its descent, painting the terraced fields in shades of amber and rust, they'd fallen into the wordless choreography of shared work. She handed him tools before he asked. He steadied the ladder without being told. At dusk, they walked together to old Mrs. Cheon's house. The elderly woman lived alone at the far edge of the village, her husband long dead, her children scattered to cities she'd never seen. Ara brought her soup twice a week, beef bone broth with radish and scallions, the kind that fortified aging joints and failing appetites. Jin-tae carried firewood. Mrs. Cheon's face crinkled with gratitude when she opened the door. "You shouldn't trouble yourselves." "It's no trouble," Ara said, slipping past her into the small kitchen. She ladled the soup into a clay pot while Jin-tae stacked wood by the hearth. Mrs. Cheon watched them with watery eyes, her gnarled hands folded in her lap. "You're good people," the old woman murmured. "This village is lucky to have you." Jin-tae said nothing. He never knew how to receive kindness. Had noticed that about him from the beginning, the way compliments seemed to pass through him like light through glass, leaving no mark. They ate dinner late, after the last chores were finished. Rice, kimchi, and grilled mackerel that Jin-tae had bought at the market that morning. Ara set the table while he washed his hands at the pump outside. Through the window, she watched him scrub his palms with almost compulsive thoroughness, the water running clear long after the dirt was gone. When he came inside, she was already seated. He took his place across from her, and they ate in comfortable silence. The only sounds were the clink of chopsticks against bowls and the distant bark of Farmer Jung's dog. "Did you hear about the inspection next month?" ARA asked, breaking the quiet. Jintai's chopsticks paused. "Inspection? Agricultural census. They're sending someone from the county office." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see." She wanted to ask why that bothered him, but she'd learned long ago which questions led nowhere. Instead, she said, "It's just paperwork. Nothing to worry about." He nodded, but didn't look at her. Right. Nothing to worry about. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, Aaron noticed him standing at the window longer than usual, staring out at the dark fields. The lamplight caught the edge of his profile, the slight furrow between his brows, the tension in his shoulders. "Jintai." "Just checking the weather," he said quickly. "Looks like rain." She didn't mention that the sky had been clear all day. That night, the rain came exactly as he'd predicted. It started as a whisper against the roof tiles, then grew into a steady drumming that filled the darkness with white noise. Aira lay in bed listening to it, feeling Jintai's warmth beside her, his breathing slow and measured. Around midnight, he rose. She heard him moving quietly through the house, the creak of floorboards, the soft click of the front door. She told herself he was checking the irrigation channels again. He did that sometimes when it rained, worried about flooding, about losing the season's work. She waited for him to return. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw his silhouette moving down the dirt path, shoulders hunched against the downpour. The lamplight from their house reached only so far before the darkness swallowed him whole. That was the last time ARA saw her husband as a free man. Kang Dae-hyun believed in three things: money, silence, and the careful application of pressure. Everything else, loyalty, honor, justice, was theater for people who couldn't afford to see the world as it actually was. He'd built his empire the way sediment forms rock, layer by layer, under immense weight, until something once soft became unbreakable. At 15, he'd run errands for loan sharks in Busan's port district. At 20, he'd learned that information moved faster than money. At 32, he owned half the waterfront and controlled the rest through men who owed him debts they could never repay. Now, at 47, Kang sat in an office above a legitimate shipping company, drinking green tea from a cup worth more than most people's monthly rent, and contemplated the nature of forgetting. "People think memory fades," he said to the man standing across his desk. "They're wrong. Memory doesn't fade. It just gets covered over by new memories, like paint over rust. But the rust is still there." The man, Park, one of his senior enforcers, said nothing. Park had learned years ago that Kang's observations didn't require response. Kang set down his teacup with deliberate precision. 6 years ago, there was a shipment. Container 17. "Do you remember?" Park's expression didn't change, but his stillness became a different quality of stillness. "The one from Manila." "The one from Manila," Kang repeated. "We lost it. Not the cargo, that was disposed of properly. We lost something more valuable. We lost certainty." The port incident had been a masterclass in containment. 43 women and girls, packed into a refrigerated container that wasn't refrigerated, discovered by customs inspectors who were supposed to have been paid off. 3 of them dead. The rest scattered into police protection programs that Kang's influence couldn't quite reach. The scandal had made national news for exactly 4 days before more powerful people than Kang made it disappear. Arrests were made, low-level players, sacrificial. The shipping company folded. New companies emerged. The port continued its work. But someone had seen. Someone had been there, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and had chosen to walk away quietly instead of screaming. Kang had spent 6 years wondering who that someone was, and whether their silence was permanent or provisional. "We have exposure," Kang said. "The prosecutor's office is reopening old cases. Someone new. Young. Ambitious." He rolled the word around his mouth like something bitter. "She thinks she can make her career on corpses." Park shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. Do we know what she has? Not yet. But she's asking questions about Container 17. Which means someone is answering them. Kang stood and walked to the window. Below, the port sprawled in every direction. Cranes like metal giants, shipping containers stacked in precise rows, ships moving in and out with tidal regularity. His kingdom. His creation. Built on understanding that the world ran on commodities, and that everything, eventually, could be bought or buried. There was a driver, Kang said quietly. Contract worker. He was scheduled to move the container that night, but he called in sick. Convenient timing. You think he saw something? I think he was smarter than most. Smart enough to stay away. Smart enough not to go to the police. Kang turned from the window. But maybe not smart enough to stay quiet forever. Park pulled out a thin folder. Inside were 3 photographs and a single page of typed text. The top photo showed a man in his mid-30s, work clothes, unremarkable features. The kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Park Jin-tae, Park read. 39 years old. Moved to Seolmi village 8 years ago. Married. No children. Keeps to himself. Works a small farm. No criminal record. No debt. No visible income beyond subsistence farming. Too clean, Kang said. Too clean, Park agreed. Bring him in. Park hesitated. It was a hesitation that lasted perhaps 2 seconds, but Kang noticed. Do you have a concern? If we're wrong, then we apologize and send him home with compensation for his trouble. Fear works best when it's occasionally applied to the innocent. It reminds everyone that safety is conditional. Park nodded once and left. Kang returned to his tea. It had gone cold, but he drank it anyway. Cold tea reminded him that patience was a virtue, but also that everything had a window of usefulness. The extraction happened at 2:17 a.m., 3 days later. Jin-tae had been walking back from checking the irrigation channels. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still soft, and he'd wanted to make sure the runoff wasn't pooling in the low corner of the west field. 2 vehicles, both dark sedans, both with tinted windows. They appeared on the dirt road as if materialized from the darkness itself. Jin-tae stopped walking. He didn't run. Running would have been pointless. 4 men emerged. They moved with professional efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary force. One showed him a badge that might have been real. Another opened the rear door of the first sedan with the courtesy of a hotel valet. Mr. Park, we need to ask you some questions. Jin-tae looked back toward the house. The windows were dark. ARA was sleeping. He thought about calling out, then thought about what would happen if he did. Am I under arrest? Just questions. Downtown. Won't take long. They were lying, and everyone present knew they were lying. But the script required the pretense of civility. Jin-tae got in the car. The phone call came at dawn. ARA woke to the sound of their old landline ringing, a sound so rare it felt like an alarm from another era. She stumbled to the kitchen, her heart already knowing something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. The voice on the other end was calm, almost gentle. Male. Educated. The kind of voice that belonged on television news programs. Mrs. Park. My name is Kang Dae-hyun. Your husband is safe. He's with me. We're having a conversation about honesty. ARA's hand tightened on the receiver. Where is he? That depends entirely on you. I need you to tell me the truth about what your husband saw 6 years ago. The port. Container 17. I need details, Mrs. Park. Specific details. I don't know what you're talking about. A pause. Then, more quietly, tell the truth, or he disappears. The line went dead. ARA stood in her kitchen, holding a silent phone, and realized with creeping horror that King didn't actually know what truth he wanted. He was fishing. Guessing. And Jin-tae's life depended on her providing an answer to a question she didn't understand. ARA sat at the kitchen table for 17 hours. She didn't sleep. Didn't eat. The phone remained in front of her like an artifact from a nightmare, silent and accusatory. Outside, The sun rose and moved across the sky with its usual indifference. Neighbors passed on the road. Someone called her name once, then moved on when she didn't answer. She allowed herself exactly 10 minutes to feel the full weight of it. 10 minutes to let her hand shake, to press her forehead against the cool wood of the table, to imagine all the terrible endings that might already be written. Then she lifted her head, smoothed her hair, and made a decision. She would not cry where anyone could see her. Tears were a currency she wouldn't give to men like Kang Dae-hyun. The first person she went to was Mrs. Cheon. The old woman opened her door at dusk, her expression shifting from surprise to understanding in the space of a breath. Age had taught her to read catastrophe in posture alone. "Come in, child." Inside, over tea that Ara couldn't taste, she explained everything. The call. The threat. The container number she didn't understand. Mrs. Cheon listened without interruption, her withered hands folded in her lap. "My son," Mrs. Cheon said when Ara finished, "worked the ports in Busan 30 years ago. He saw things. Terrible things. When he tried to speak up, they broke both his legs and told him it was a workplace accident. The company paid compensation. He took it. What choice did he have?" She paused. "He walks with a cane still." "I'm sorry," Ara whispered. "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Mrs. Cheon leaned forward. "You're going to need help. And this village has longer memories than men like Kang realize." By the next morning, Ara had spoken to 11 families. Farmer Jung, whose daughter had been lured to Seoul by traffickers promising factory work. She'd escaped, but barely. The fisherman Ko, whose brother had drowned under suspicious circumstances after witnessing a smuggling operation. The Kim sisters, whose family restaurant had been burned down when their father refused to pay protection money. Each story was different. Each wound was the same. They gathered in the community center on the third evening. 23 villagers, ranging from teenagers to octogenarians. Ara stood before them, her back straight, her voice steady. "I need to know everything you know about Kang Dae-hyun," she said. "Anything. No detail is too small." They spoke for hours. Kang's business fronts. His associates. His patterns. The way he moved through the world like weather. Inevitable, impersonal, destructive. Then young Mi, the postmaster's wife, said something that changed everything. His mother lives in Daegu. Alone. She runs a small bakery near the university. The room went quiet. "How do you know this?" Ara asked. Young Mi's expression was complicated. "My cousin works at the community center there. The old woman donates bread to the senior meal program every week. Never misses. She uses her maiden name, Han. Han Eme-san. My cousin says she's kind. Gentle. Nothing like her son." Aya felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope. Something more dangerous. Does Kang visit her? Once a month. Always on the second Sunday. Always alone. The room began to murmur with possibilities. Ayara could feel the energy changing, darkening. Old Farmer Jung was already talking about leverage, about making Kang feel what it meant to lose someone. The fisherman Ko mentioned how easy it would be to send men to Daegu, to make the old woman understand her son's sins. "No." Ayara's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We are not him," she said quietly. "We will not become what we're fighting against." "Then what do you propose?" Jung demanded. "We let him keep your husband. We do nothing. I propose we remember who we are." Ara looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "We are Seolmi. We take care of the elderly. We share our harvests. We carry firewood to those who can't carry it themselves. That is our strength. Not cruelty. Not fear." Mrs. Cheon spoke up from her corner. "What are you thinking, child?" Ara took a breath. "The autumn festival is in 4 days. We invite her. Han Eme-san. We treat her with the respect she deserves. We show her the village, the people her son is threatening. We let her see who we are." "And if she refuses to help?" the fisherman asked. Then at least we tried with our dignity intact. The vote was unanimous. 2 days later, young Ami's cousin delivered the invitation personally. She found Han and my son in her small bakery, kneading dough with flour-dusted hands. The old woman read the invitation 3 times, her expression unreadable. "They know," she said finally. "About my son." "They know," the cousin confirmed. "They're inviting you anyway." Han and my son closed the bakery early that day. She sat in her small apartment above the shop and thought about the son she'd raised, the bright boy who'd brought her wildflowers, who'd helped her knead bread before school, who'd promised to make her proud. She thought about the man he'd become. Then she made her own phone call. Kang was in a meeting when his personal line rang. He never answered his personal line during meetings. But he recognized the number, and there were exactly 3 people in the world whose calls he would take without exception. Mother. Dae-hyun. Her voice was tired. "I need to know something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you take a man from his home? A farmer named Park Jin-tae?" Kang's expression didn't change, but everyone in the room felt the temperature drop. "It's business, Mother. It doesn't concern you. I'm going to Seoul for their autumn festival. The people there have invited me. They've been very kind." For the first time in 20 years, Kang Dae-hyun felt something close to panic. "Mother, you can't. I've already accepted," she said gently. "I'll see you when I return. Please think about what kind of man you want to be when we speak next." The line went dead. Kang sat motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, while his empire continued its work around him and his carefully constructed certainty began to crack. Kang arrived in Seoul with 8 men and enough firepower to level a city block. The village was preparing for the autumn festival when the convoy rolled in. Black SUVs that looked obscene against the backdrop of rice terraces and paper lanterns. Villagers stopped their work and watched. No one ran. No one screamed. They simply stood in their doorways and fields, bearing witness. Kang stepped out of the lead vehicle, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. He'd expected fear, chaos, the frantic energy of people who'd overplayed their hand. Instead, he found silence. ARA waited in the center of the village square, surrounded by 24 villagers. Mrs. Cheon sat in a chair someone had brought out for her. Farmer Jung stood with his arms crossed. The Kim sisters held their children close but didn't retreat. Young Mi, the postmaster's wife, was recording everything on her phone. "Where is she?" Kang's voice was controlled, but tension radiated from him like heat. "Your mother is safe," ARA said. "She's being treated as our honored guest. We've prepared a room at the community center. Mrs. Cheon made her favorite soup. She asked your mother what she liked." Kang's jaw tightened. "I want to see her. Now." "Of course. After we talk." One of Kang's men moved forward. Park, the same enforcer who'd taken Jin-tae 3 nights ago. His hand moved toward his jacket, where everyone knew he kept his weapon. Mrs. Cheon spoke up, her voice carrying across the square with surprising strength. "Young man, you can shoot us if you want. But there are cameras recording. There are witnesses. And your bullets won't change what happens next." Park froze. Kang looked around the square, really looked, and began to understand. These people weren't afraid because they'd already decided they were willing to die. You couldn't threaten someone who'd made peace with the worst possible outcome. "What do you want?" he asked finally. ARA held up a sealed envelope. 6 years ago, my husband witnessed something at the port. He didn't go to the police. He didn't speak publicly. But he wasn't silent. He wrote down everything he saw, dates, times, container numbers, names, and had it notarized. He gave it to a lawyer in Seoul with instructions to open it only if something happened to him. The blood drained from Kang's face. "The lawyer called me yesterday," ARA continued. "When Jin-tae didn't check in as scheduled. He's prepared to deliver the testimony to prosecutors unless Jin-tae confirms he's safe by noon today." Kang's mind raced. Container 17. The names. The logistics chain. The officials who'd been paid off. All of it documented, notarized, legally admissible. You kidnapped the wrong leverage, ARA said quietly. You should have been afraid of what he'd already done, not what he might do. Before Kang could respond, the community center door opened. Han Mi Sun emerged, escorted gently by young Mi's cousin. She was smaller than Kang remembered. Age had diminished her frame but not her presence. She wore a simple hanbok that the village women had helped her into, her grey hair pulled back in a traditional style. She looked at her son for a long moment. No anger in her expression. No tears. Just a profound sadness that was somehow worse than both. Mother, don't. Her voice was soft but absolute. I raised you better than this, Dae-hyun. I taught you to protect people, not prey on them. When did you forget? Kang had prepared for many scenarios. Negotiations. Violence. Legal maneuvering. He had not prepared for his mother's disappointment, delivered in a voice that carried 30 years of sacrifices he'd spent 20 years trying to forget. These people invited me into their homes, she continued. They fed me. They shared their stories. They treated me with kindness even though they knew who I was, who you are. She paused. Mrs. Park told me about her husband. About you taking him in the night like a common thug. It's business. It's cruelty. She turned to ARA. I'm sorry for what my son has become. Whatever I can do to help, I will. ARA's eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. Just take him home, Ajumma. That's help enough. The exchange happened at dawn the next morning. The sky was the color of pale jade, the air cool and still. Kang's men brought Jin-tai to the village boundary in one vehicle. ARA walked her mother-in-law to the same spot from the opposite direction. No one spoke. The only sounds were footsteps on gravel and distant birdsong. Jin-tai looked thinner, exhausted, but whole. His eyes found ARA's across the distance, and something passed between them that needed no words. He'd held out. She'd found him. That was enough. The swap took 17 seconds. Jin-tai walked toward his wife. Han Mi Sun walked toward her son. They passed each other in the middle, and ARA saw the old woman reach out to touch Jin-tai's shoulder gently, a gesture of apology, of recognition. When Jin-tai reached ARA, she took his hand. His fingers were cold but steady. Han Mi Sun stopped in front of Kang. She looked up at him, this powerful man who commanded empires and inspired fear, and said quietly, You've built everything on sand, my son. It will not last. Then she turned to ARA, still standing with Jin-tai in the middle distance, and her expression softened into something like admiration. You are stronger than my son, she called out. Remember that. The investigations began 3 weeks later. Prosecutors armed with Jin-tai's testimony dismantled Kang's network piece by piece. Cargo companies, shell corporations, officials who'd looked the other way. Some went to prison. Others fled. Kang himself faced charges that would take years to resolve, his empire collapsing under the weight of documentation and witnesses who were no longer afraid to speak. Han Mi Sun closed her bakery and moved to a monastery in the mountains. She donated everything Kang had given her to organizations that helped trafficking victims. Seolmi returned to its quiet rhythms. The autumn festival came and went. Harvests were gathered. Winter preparations began. The story of what happened spread through whispered conversations and late-night phone calls, but the village itself resumed its careful anonymity. ARA and Jin-tai left on a Tuesday morning, carrying 2 bags and telling no one where they were going. Mrs. Cheon found a note on her doorstep thanking her for the soup, for the solidarity, for remembering that strength came in forms that couldn't be measured by fear. The village remembered them not as heroes but as neighbors who'd reminded everyone what they were capable of when they stood together. Because the strongest weapon isn't violence or money or the machinery of power that men like Kang spend lifetimes constructing. The strongest weapon is unity, people who refuse to be divided, who choose dignity over safety, who understand that true strength is measured not by what you can take, but by what you're willing to give. And that is how a village defeated a mafia boss, without firing a single shot. Thank you for staying till the end. Most people click away, but you didn't, and that means something. Don't disappear now, subscribe, stay close this year, and keep walking with us through these stories. Comment, share, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters more than you know today.